24 hours since Larry Page surprised investors with a big deal. Google spending $12.5 billion to buy Motorola Mobility. Now, shares of that company jumping more than 50% on Monday. But is it a good fit? And will Google make it as a phone manufacturer? We've got Nicholas Carson, deputy editor at Business Insider, and Brian Sozzi of Wall Street Strategies, of course, is still with us. Nick, I want to start with you. Is this deal purely a defensive play, or does Google actually have a positive reason for doing it?
Google had to go out and buy some patents. Microsoft was going to go in and buy patents from Motorola at the last minute. Google kind of came in, bought a bunch of patents, and then decided to buy the whole thing, buy all of Motorola. Larry Page goes crazy.
Well, the patent security makes sense, but at the same time, Google's going to be competing with some of its partners. So how does that work?
Well, Larry Page is the new guy in charge at Google, and he likes to play with things. A couple years ago, they bought DoubleClick. When they did that, there's a small search engine marketing firm inside DoubleClick. Everyone at Google told Eric Schmidt, the CEO at the time, you can't buy Performix, the search engine marketing firm, at the same time. It would get us in trouble with antitrust. Larry's like, let's do it. Let's see what happens. They eventually convinced him not to do it.
Yeah.
But in this case, apparently that didn't work. Like, Larry's like, let's go ahead and get a phone business, see what happens. So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a challenge.
We'll see. Exactly. Definitely a bold move there.
Right.
Yeah, Nicholas. Just in terms of Android. Hello, it's Louisa in London. In terms of Android,
Hey,
how much of a difference is this going to make to the potential of Android?
Well, it could be a real big deal for Android eventually, because what sort of Google's seen here is that Apple, having hardware and software integrated, is ahead of the game in terms of what consumers like, and you might be able to see Google, which makes the software, Motorola, which makes the hardware, sort of cohere in a way that previously they haven't, and you can get great innovation with them. But that's years from now, and that's if Google somehow successfully integrates 19,000 Motorola employees, turns them all into Googlers. It's going to cost $95 million just to feed these people the way that Google feeds the rest of its Googlers.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. Well, also, Nicholas, I was talking to another guest a bit earlier about the spill-off effect that we're seeing on some of the other stocks in the same industry, and I was a bit curious to see the Nokia reaction that we saw yesterday. I mean, Nokia bouncing by some 7-8%. Granted, it's not worth a lot in euro terms, but still, with regards to the benefit, the direct benefit to some of the other companies in the industry, which ones would you single out?
Follow-up to bring in Brian.
Well, I think Nokia is a good one to look at, obviously, because people wonder if Microsoft's going to come in and be forced to buy Nokia at this point, or perhaps Research in Motion out of Canada.
Meantime, I just want to jump in and ask you about some of the swings that we saw yesterday based on this news. We saw the markets rallying on the idea of some M&A back out there, of course, again. But is this sort of long-lived, Brian? Do you think that this will continue, or?
I think it's something we need to keep an eye on here, Jackie, especially on valuations. I believe at the lowest since 2008 on a price-to-earnings multiple base. You have companies sitting on a stiff amount of cash, and they might want to use this correction to consolidate their position. And I actually had a question for Nick on this. In terms of, as an investor, Google shares declined yesterday, I believe, about 5% on this news. Where does the biggest integration risk lie at this point, putting these companies together?
Well, it comes down to Larry Page. Is Larry Page seriously going to hang on to the phone business, or is this actually about patents? And when you invest in Google at this point, you're no longer just investing in the search company. You're doing this thing where, like with Amazon, you're investing in Jeff Bezos. Like with Apple, you're investing in Steve Jobs. You're now investing in Larry Page, and it's going to be a ride because he likes to take big bets. He'll spend $12.5 billion on a crazy business with 19,000 employees. I mean, like, if you look at Motorola's margins, they are lousy, and it's $3 billion revenues.
How do they get that hardware business up? Is it a matter of just cutting employees down to get that operating margin up on that hardware side of the business, or is just finding better ways to do what Motorola Mobility is doing?
Google has a little bit of Jack Welch in it. They'll go in and they'll cut employees if they have to. They took, when they bought DoubleClick a couple years ago, 2007, they took 40% out of the company in terms of headcount. So they'll do it if they have to.
And let me just jump in and quickly ask about Microsoft. What does this do to Microsoft?
Well, Microsoft has a bit of an opening because they were nowhere before in mobile. Now they have maybe some leverage with Google's former partners. The big problem for Microsoft is that as great as Windows Phone 7 has been for the testers and the gadget reviewers, consumers haven't really sort of glommed to it yet. So we'll see. It's a big...
Fantastic. Well, interesting to see how it's going to play out. Thank you so much, Nicholas Carson, Deputy Editor at Business Insider. Up next on Worldwide Exchange, we look at the trading day ahead on Wall Street and preview the corporate and economic numbers that could move the markets today. Stay with us.